Hello, my name is Ashley. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I kind of want to just talk about my favorite romance books and then also talk about my summer of romance TBR. Usually in the summer, I only read romance, and I do that just because I think it's fun. Romance screams summer to me, and so I usually like to dedicate the summer just to romance reads. Um, I feel like this year might be the last year that I do it only because this is the first time in my life where I have more books than I can read them. And I already know all the books on my physical TBR I'm not going to be able to read until after the summer is over. Um, whereas, normal people would probably just roll it over into June, but I think I'm already so dedicated to only reading romance for the summer that I'm like, okay, we'll shelve these until fall, but I think next year will be, the year that I just read whatever during the summer. We'll probably still try to keep it as like a summery vibe. But even if it's like summer thrillers or um like just other general summer fiction books, I will probably branch out and do that next summer, but not this year. This year we will do only romance in the summer, and so I have a lot of books. Very ambitious TBR. Don't think I'm going to get to all of them, but that's fine. But I'm going to tell you about them anyways. So, first half of this video, I'm just going to talk about my favorite romance books so far. And then, second half, we're going to go into my TBR. So, let's get started. Okay, I noticed in my last video I used the word like a lot and it was driving me actually insane, and I'm embarrassed. And so this video I told myself I'm going to try to keep my thoughts very concise, so that way I don't annoy myself when I try to edit this and annoy anyone who ends up watching. And so let's get into the first book. The first book that I want to talk about that is literally one of my favorite romance books ever is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This book is extremely popular, so I don't even think I'm giving a niche take here. This book is very popular and for good reason. This book follows Ava and Shane. They are both romance authors, both established, not romance authors, they're both just authors, but they're both already very established authors, and they knew each other when they were kids and they had a very whirlwind romance, but then they never saw each other again. But then in their adult life they reconnect, and this book was truly just so beautiful. I typically don't really gravitate towards like heavier romances, but this book, it was heavy, but it was also incredible. This book really tackles topics like racism, um like invisible illness, being a single parent, trying to find a way back into someone's life that you haven't seen in so long when now there's like a child involved. And so honestly, I really do feel like everyone should read this book. It's so interesting because I think everyone should try to diversify their reading, um, and not just read books that are, you know, from the more popular white authors, but also black authors as well, and take time to educate themselves. And I usually feel like it's very easy to do that in fiction, like to read fiction that centers around like general contemporary fiction that centers around black people and the struggles that they face. I don't typically would ever recommend, even though yes, diversify your romance reads no matter what, diversify all your reading, but I remember reading this book and thinking I would actually recommend this to someone, not just as a romance, but if someone just wants to be more informed, I guess, about the black experience and um like the struggles that poor black people would have to face. I would recommend this book, and I think this is why this book has stood out to me for so long, because it's just so much more than just a romance. It really is just, I feel like it just tackles so many deep and important topics that I think a lot of people can benefit from. So that's 7 Days in June, one of my favorite romances. And I also wanted to talk about another Tia Williams book that I don't have, because I lent it to my sister, and this video is a reminder for me to ask for the book back. But it's a love song, by Ricky Wilde. That book also incredible. A love song for Ricky Wilde released last year, I believe, or was it the year before? I think it was last year, but that book was amazing. It was so funny. I think Tia Williams, when she does branch into writing a more lighthearted romance, she does it so well because they are genuinely so hilarious. A Love Song for Ricky Wilde also contains elements of magical realism, which I didn't really think I would like as much, but it worked so well. It follows Ricky, and then I forgot the male main character's name, but basically, he is like a character from the past, but he's almost stuck in time in a way, and they meet in Harlem, so you get the New York vibes, but you don't just get New York in the present, you get New York and Harlem in the past, which was also so amazing, and just so atmospheric. The book was very atmospheric, but Ricky as a character, she is just hilarious, and I think anyone and the book did tackle like deeper themes, but it was also very lighthearted as well. So I recommend that book to everybody. I still just have such fond memories of reading that book because I just remember laughing so much. So yeah, that's A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. And those are, I love Tia Williams. She's one of my favorite authors, but I think those are the two books of hers that I love and would recommend the most. Okay, let's move on. The next book that I want to talk about is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Kennedy Ryan is also a very, very famous, well known romance author. But this book follows Yasmin and Josiah. They were previously married, they're now divorced, and it's a second chance romance. It just basically follows how they find their way back to each other. Again, like 7 Days in June, this is one of those books that is definitely a heavy romance, and it's not something that I thought I would ever typically gravitate towards, but this book was so beautiful. It had me sobbing because it's not just about romance, it really is a lot about Yasmin finding herself, and something tragic happens to both Yasmin and Josiah that was kind of, in a way, part of what pushed them apart. And Yasmin harbors a lot of guilt from that, but this book is not, like, again, it's not just about Yasmin and Josiah fighting each other again, but it's about them, and especially Yasmin, just finding forgiveness for yourself, finding forgiveness for the mistakes, and not even mistakes, but just when something happens and you just can't help but assume responsibility, but just finally releasing yourself of that and allowing yourself to feel the pain, but also just move on from carrying the burden, was so powerful. I still think about this book all the time. This book is part of a series, Skyland, and it basically follows Yasmin and then her two best friends, Soledad and Hendrix. I read Soledad's book as well, This Could Be Us. I highly recommend that book as well. It was also another beautiful story. I'm just using Before I Let Go as kind of a placeholder for that book as well. But Soledad's story, hers is like a second chance at love because she ends up going through a divorce from her current husband, who is a snake, but she ends up finding love again through just this very calm and compassionate and grounding man who supports her as she tries to raise her three daughters all on her own. Especially because Soledad was never the income earner for her family. So now not only is she going through a divorce, but she also has to find a way to provide for her children. And it was just such a powerful story. Um, Lots to talk about blended families. Both of those books are pretty heavy. Lots of discussion about, mental health, the good and the bad, but I do think it's important, especially male mental health as well. I loved that she addressed both of those things in the series. And then the third book in the Skyland series, I'm going to talk about it when I talk about my TBR later because it is on there and I cannot wait to read it. And another book, romance book, that I highly recommend. This book actually is not even released yet. It is What Should Have Been Ours by Faith Pinkay. Um, Faith is like one of the girls in the book club that I'm a part of, and she wrote this book, and it is so beautiful and emotional. Literally made me sob. It follows Gabrielle and Cameron. They were childhood lovers, but they were both battling cancer, and so they kind of met and had their whole relationship almost within like the pediatric cancer ward. But then Cameron moves away, so they lose touch, and then it's like not until 12 years later where they finally reconnect, when Cameron is now a practicing pediatric oncologist, that they rekindle their love and their flame. It is very, very, very emotional. I tell Faith in our book club group chat, literally jail. And sometimes I can't even think about the book because I will literally start crying. And I'm someone who works in oncology, and it is just so, it is tough. It is not easy. And this book is very, very emotional, but it is so good. So many beautiful quotes. Again, if you love those emotional reads, I highly recommend that one. It comes out June 28th. So go pre order. Everyone go on Amazon, type in What Should Have Been Ours by Faith Pinkay. Order that book because it's beautiful and incredible and amazing. So if anyone's watching this, pause and go order. Okay. Back to the rest of the books. And so the next book that I want to talk about is One She Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is one of the books in her backlist, and I think all of the books in her backlist would be classified as romance, but this is the one that just sticks out the most. This book follows Emma. Emma was married, but her husband goes missing. He goes missing for years, to the point where she thinks that he's dead. So she goes and moves on with like a childhood friend, like an old childhood friend, and you know, they end up getting engaged, but then all of a sudden her husband that she thought was dead ends up coming back. Like he was always alive, and he comes back into her life, and now she has to make this like terrible decision of like, do I, and of course her husband comes back and like still wants her, like he still wants her, he still wants his wife. And so this book really just follows Emma's decision of who is she going to pick, and it kind of grapples with this idea of, is there only one true love of your life? And I loved this book just because it was so emotional, but also um I just I personally believe that you can fall in love with many people. I don't necessarily believe in the concept of the one. I think there are lots of people in this world who you could love and who you could theoretically make things work with, but it's about choosing the person that that you're like, you know what, there probably is someone out there in this world that's more compatible like with me, but I still choose to be with you, and I still want to try to make things work with you. I think that is so powerful, and I love that this book kind of addressed that topic and that thought of, is there only the one, or can you love multiple people in your lifetime, and what does that look like? And so this book, beautiful. I highly, highly recommend everyone read this, especially if you love an emotional romance. I am done talking about emotional romances now. Again, I can't believe I actually didn't even really realize it, but the first three books that I recommended are more emotional romances, which I don't typically gravitate towards. Um, but I don't know. I guess these books really just left such a big impact on me, and um yeah, I think if you love romance with a lot of depth, you will love the first few books that I talked about. But let's go into some lighthearted reads. The next book that I want to talk about is Love Interest by Claire Gilmore. I picked this book up because I saw Haley Pham talk about it, but this basically takes place in New York City, such an atmospheric place. We love books that take place in NYC, but it follows Casey and Alex. It's rivals to lovers because they're both gunning for the same position at the same company that they both work at, but it has an added layer of Alex, let me just put this out there. He is a great male main character. So this is no Alex slander, but he is a little bit of a nepo baby. And so it's just, he's gunning for like this top position, but Casey's like, but doesn't your dad like run or like own part of the company? it's definitely giving nepotism vibes. But this book was so fun. It was so funny. I don't know, I just loved it. It was so atmospheric. It was just great. I really think if you love books that take place in New York City, you're gonna love this. It was definitely very lighthearted. Of course, it tackles it's not just about the romance, but I don't know. I think there was something, I don't really remember. I think there was something talked about with like Casey's family, that maybe she doesn't have the best family dynamic. I know Alex, even though his dad runs a company, he doesn't have the best relationship with his dad. So it kind of, goes into a little bit of those topics. But overall, I think if you just want a really cute, funny read and where you're really rooting for the characters and they have great chemistry too, these two have great chemistry and you really get to see them develop from rivals to friends to lovers, which is like my favorite. Just like not just from rivals to like straight up making out, but just like rivals to friends to lovers. Love interest is amazing. And I highly recommend that too. The next book that I want to talk about is The Neighbor Favor. This book is actually a placeholder for the whole series. Um, the series involves Lily, her sister Violet, and Iris, but this book is Lily's book. It's the first book in the series. This book, incredible. I read it last year and I fell in love. It follows Lily and Nick. Nick is an author, Lily works in publishing, but she really wants to become like a children's book editor. But unbeknownst to her, Nick is her favorite author, and she has been like emailing with him, um, for a long time. But Nick kind of uses a pen name, but then he ends up moving next door to her. But she doesn't know that it's him because he uses a pen name, and he doesn't realize it's her at first, but then he kind of does. So there's a little bit of tension and drama there. They're both very shy and quiet, but then you see them fall in love, and it is just so beautiful. Again, this book takes place in New York City, and it was so cool because at the time that I read this, I was living in New York and the characters live near Union Square, and that was the train station that I would always get off of to go to class every single like almost every single day. So it was just really cool. I'm like I know this area. Like I know exactly what they're talking about, and it was just really really cool. Um and so again, this book kind of just serves as a placeholder for the whole series because the partner plot and the love lyric are also a part of this, and both books are also incredible too. I just love this book specifically. This book was the first in the series, and it was my favorite just because I could relate to Lily so much. Like reading Lily, I felt like I was literally reading about myself. Like I was like, oh, Lily is like, I'm a twin, so I guess she would be my long lost triplet in a way. But I don't know, I just felt really connected to Lily as a character, which is what made me love this book so so much. But then of course, Violet's Lily's sister Violet, the partner plot, her book is kind of like a second chance romance where she ends up ending. I don't want to spoil it, but like you know what? I don't want to spoil it. I feel like I can't talk about Violet and Iris's book without kind of spoiling what happens in here. So if you haven't read this book, just read it and then read the other two books in the series too. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. But this book, absolutely, Christina Forrest, love you, love you, love you. You were incredible. Thank you for giving the series. I'm so grateful that I read it, and I actually kind of want to reread it. So maybe I will this summer. Um, and then the next book that I want to talk about, let's go into some Ali Hazelwood. This book is Check and Mate. This book is a chess romance. It follows Mallory and Nolan, and it's rivals to lovers. They're both incredible chess players, and they kind of end up, I don't know, just like playing, competing against each other, but then of course they fall in love. This book was very controversial because it's technically considered YA, but a lot of people think that it's a little too mature for YA. I agree. I do think that she talks about sex a lot in this book, and I understand that Ali Hazelwood has a more liberal opinion of sex in the sense that Mallory, she's I think 18 in this book, but she has younger siblings who are still minors, and she does talk about sex with them. She does talk Mallory is talked about as having like hooked up with a lot of people. And I get that she's trying to make sex seem less taboo for maybe like a teenager who may start to have those feelings but may feel ashamed of them. But at the same time, like, I agree with the criticism. I think I was able to separate it from the rest of her books because when I read this, I actually think it's one of Ali Hazelwood's more well-written books, and I loved the story. So I think I was able to separate it from the fact that it's supposed to be marketed as YA, even though this isn't really a YA book. So I wouldn't really recommend a teenager or a middle schooler to read it. It was still really good, but I understand the critique. I understand that Ali is trying to make sex less taboo, but at the same time, I also don't necessarily think that is something that should necessarily be encouraged towards someone that young. Again, I mean, if you are a teenager or you're in middle school, especially middle school, I mean, I get it. Like, you have those feelings, those thoughts, those desires. You shouldn't be ashamed of them. But I still think it's a little too young to get into all of that. I think that level of intimacy, I think it's too young for someone in middle school, even high school to a certain extent. But I understand that she's trying to make it less taboo. And I appreciate that I think she is coming from the perspective of like, you shouldn't be ashamed if you do those things, or feel embarrassed about it. And I agree, you shouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed, but I do think it's just a little too young to be doing all of that stuff. And so I do think there's like a gray area with like, yes, don't want to facilitate shame, but also maybe we also shouldn't be encouraging it either. I think that's the thing. You don't want to you don't want to talk about it in a shameful lens, but I also don't necessarily think it should be encouraged. And I think a lot of people reading this book felt like she was encouraging like young girls, young men to engage in this behavior, which again, I understand, but I still think the book was good. Okay, like all of that aside, the book was good. Read it if you're an adult, not a child, but if you're an adult, read this book. It's good. The next Ali Hazelwood book that I want to talk about is Love on the Brain. This Ali Hazelwood book, I feel like, is one of her least talked about, and it's probably my favorite. This book follows B and Levi, and I believe it's been so long since I read this book, but I still think about it to this day because I remember it being so good, and I honestly think I'm going to reread it. But it's basically about it's another all of Ali Hazelwood's books are like enemies slash rivals to lovers, pretty much, but they both end up being like working at the same place. But I think, hold on, I do think they have. Yes, they have history, I believe, from grad school, and then she thinks she's never really gonna see him again. But then obviously she does and they end up working together, and there is some drama, but this book was really good. It was really funny. I like Ali Hazelwood as an author. I will say her books follow a very specific formula, where it can get a little bit repetitive, where the setting is always STEM, which I do like, but then the girl is always a little bit kind of quirky, and then the guy is always so brooding and angry and gigantic, and um sometimes it could be a little bit much. But her books are always very entertaining, even if it's not like it's gonna win a Pulitzer Prize. But she does have talent in writing entertaining books, but this one just stuck out to me. I think I remember it being really, really funny. The only thing that I don't love about Ali Hazelwood's books, I can't separate it, but obviously I'm well, this is not obvious if you've never watched my videos before. I am a Christian. I don't mind or really care about reading books about people who aren't Christians. That doesn't bother me, especially someone who's questioned a lot of things. I'm actually all for books that explore questioning or trying to find reason within Christianity. I don't really like books that mock it though. And I do feel like sometimes in Ali Hazelwood's books, and I did notice this in a little bit in this one, how they kind of mock God a little bit. I think they refer to God as like the spaghetti monster. And so, I mean, obviously, I'm able to separate it because I still love this book and I still would recommend it. But I guess if you're a Christian and you don't like reading about those things, that's the one caveat that I would give. Because that's the really the only thing that took me out of this book a little bit that I didn't love. Again, I really do believe everyone's entitled to their beliefs. I'm assuming Allie Hazelwood is an atheist. I do know she is a scientist as well, which I completely respect and I completely understand that she has the views that she has, and there's absolutely no problem with making an atheist character. But I just sometimes it could veer into mocking territory, and I think that's where it gets a little iffy. But overall, I think the book was still really good. The next book that I want to talk about is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This is one of their more recent releases. This released last year, and it was really, really good. It's so atmospheric. This book follows, I can never remember characters' names, I'm so sorry, Anna and Liam. They pretended to be married in college for the financial benefits, but Liam is actually heir to like a billionaire family. His family, imagine like, okay, if you live in South Florida, I would say Publix, like that's our grocery store in Florida. Imagine if like your dad or your family owned Publix and like all the public franchises and chains. That's literally Liam's family. They own like a huge, massive grocery store chain, so they're filthy, filthy rich. And then he is about to get his inheritance, but the only way he can get his inheritance is if he's been married, but he was married and then divorced, but it was like a fraud marriage. It was a real marriage with paperwork, but it was a fraud because they never really saw each other. It was only for the benefits. But now, of course, Liam has to go back to Anna and be like, hey, you need to come with me to my sister's wedding and pretend to be my wife so I can get my inheritance. Um, and they agree, and the wedding takes place in paradise. It takes place on this extremely beautiful island, and this book was just so funny. I loved Anna as a character. Liam's family kind of sucks, but that's like the point. But the setting was so atmospheric. The way they described the island was just so beautiful. You really felt immersed in the setting. I really do like Christina Lauren. I think they write a lot of entertaining books, and this one was one of their best. And then the next book by Christina Lauren that I want to talk about is The Unhoneymooners. This is the first Christina Lauren book that I read, and it is extremely popular. But I love this book. It follows Olive and Ethan. They are enemies, but they're also the respective like maid of honors and best man at Olive's sister's wedding, I believe. But Olive and Ethan, or no, Olive and Ethan, Olive's sister, the bride, and the groom get like sick. I think they get like food poisoning at the wedding. But Olive and Ethan shockingly are the only ones who weren't affected by the food poisoning, so they have to go on the honeymoon together so the honeymoon doesn't go to waste. And this book was really, really fun. You really get to see them warm up to each other in their honeymoon. I think it's like a 10-day honeymoon, but I like that the book doesn't end there. It kind of follows them after the honeymoon and into their life, and you kind of see Olive trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life. But and kind of see where Ethan like fits into all of that. But it was really, really cute. This is another book that I want to reread. It was just fun, like getting to see just how, they start enemies, but then they warm up to each other in the honeymoon and then become a real couple. It was really, really sweet. And then the last book in this recommendation that I want to talk about is Funny Story. Funny Story kind of serves as a placeholder for all of Emily Henry books. I love all of Emily Henry's books, but Funny Story is my favorite. Funny Story follows Daphne and Miles. Oh my gosh. I had a bookmark in here and I didn't even realize it. That's fun. But anyways, it follows Daphne and Miles. They both got dumped by their respective exes. Actually, their exes left them for each other. But Daphne needs a place to stay, so she ends up moving in with Miles. And I loved this book. This book is very New Girl core. New Girl is one of my favorite shows of all time. I've literally seen that show like 10 times. But Daphne is so Jess and Miles is so Nick. And so I literally just fell in love with both of them as characters. It was just so funny. I think it's probably the best banter Emily Henry has had. It was one of the more lighthearted of her books, but I loved it. It was so good. And then um I don't know. It was just very much like opposites attract. Like Daphne is a librarian, Miles works as like a bartender. I believe or he works in like the service industry. They are so different, but just like seeing them come together, it was just amazing. And again, it reminded me of New Girl. If you love New Girl, you're going to love Funny Story. Um you're gonna love that book. Just seeing them come together, it kind of reminded me of me and my boyfriend a little bit, which is why I like the book as well. I feel like we are also very Jess and Nick, Daphne and Miles core. So I just highly recommend Funny Story and literally read all of Emily Henry's books. I'm gonna put them up on the screen. Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, also another one of my favorites by her. Book Lovers, Happy Place. I haven't read her new book, Great Big Beautiful Life, but I have been saving it. I don't know if I'll read it in June when my summer romance starts. I think I'll read it towards the end of May. But I don't know. I've been wanting to just savor that book and give it its own moment. So I've just been waiting to read it while I get through the rest of my TBR. But seriously, read all of Emily Henry's books. They're all amazing. So those are my favorite romances that I recommend. Let's get into my summer romance TBR, the romances that I want to read this summer. Alrighty, so I have about 33 books on my summer TBR. I do not think I'm gonna get to all of them. That is a very big stretch, but I'm gonna try to get to most of them. I also think I might be doing some rereads this summer, so we'll see. But either way, I'm not gonna like describe. I don't know if any of these books I'm about to mention because we'd literally be here forever. But I'm just gonna list them out, and if anyone is familiar, let me know with any of these books or if it's on anyone else's TBR. I would love to hear about that too. But the first book on my summer TBR is Perfect Fit by Claire Gilmore. I talked about Love Interest earlier. This is her new release. I think it released in October of last year. I didn't even know that until this year, but once I saw, I was like, immediately added to summer TBR. I cannot wait to read it. I love Love Interest, so I'm really hopeful that I'll love Perfect Fit as well. I also want to read Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. I think this is like a rival musician's romance. I honestly never really had any interest in reading this book because I hated the cover and I would hear people talk about it. It just never sounded interesting to me, but I don't know. I heard one specific booktuber talking about it. I don't remember exactly who it was, but the way they described the book convinced me, and I kind of think that I would really like to try to check that one out. Then I want to read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. This is her new release. It released this year in February. I have been putting it off to save for the summer. I think it's like a rival. I think they're like both competitive swimmers, or he's a swimmer, the female main character is a diver. I heard this book is very smutty. Excuse me. I heard this book is very smutty, very BDSM esque. So I guess we'll see how I feel. Um, I'm not really into that kind of thing. Usually, spice I just skip. I'm glad I kind of knew about the BDSM stuff, so that way I kind of have for a warning going into this book. Because I think if I read it and I didn't know that, I don't know if my reading experience would be super pleasant. So I'm hoping, knowing what I know about this book, I can go in with a more realistic expectation as to what this book is about, and maybe it won't be a dud. But then the next thing that I want to read, I think it's called the Rebel Blue Ranch series, Done and Dusted, Swift and Saddled, Lost and Lassoed, Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. And then I do want to finish the Chestnut Spring series. I read, these are all cowboy romances, by the way. The Rebel Blue Ranch and the Chestnut Springs series. I read the first three books of Chestnut Springs last summer, and the third book was so bad to me that I physically could not continue the rest of the series. The first two books weren't bad, but whatever that third book was called, Powerless or whatever, that book was so god awful. It made me want to bleach my eyeballs and forget the entire series ever really existed. It kind of ruined the rest of the series for me, but I do want to finish it. I'm like, I started, I do want to finish. So, and then I want to read Done and Dusted because I'm like, maybe I think the covers are really cute, but I'm like, maybe it will redeem Chestnut Springs for me. Maybe I need a different kind of cowboy romance. So we'll see. But then I also want to read Love and Other Disasters and A Perfect Vintage. Those are just two random books that I've seen circulating around that I think would be fun to get to. So, we'll see. But then I also want to read Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. I have not heard the best things about this book, and if I'm being completely honest, Abby Jimenez is not my favorite romance author. I have read all of her books up until Say You Remember Me, and I've kind of all given them within the range of like 3 to 3.5 stars. Um, it's hard because Abby Jimenez is a great author, and I do think she writes good banter. I like the couples, but I just think her books are a little too insta lovey and they're so traumatic. And I understand, like, okay, 7 Days in June had a lot of traumatic and deep themes in it, but it had a purpose. Sometimes with Abby Jimenez, I feel like her books are just trauma for the sake of trauma. They're so heavy, but it's like she wants you to think it's like this lighthearted romance, but then the themes in there will be so heavy. And I'm like, am I laughing? Am I crying? And I don't know if I necessarily love that. So I just don't know. I haven't really been able to connect with any one of her books. I've been told this book is her most insta lovey yet. So a part of me feels hesitant to read it, but I am curious and I do want to form my own opinion to see if I'll think differently about this one. And so yeah, so we'll see how I feel about that one. Then I also want to read Attached at the Hip by Christine Riccio. This is another random book that I kind of saw. I think it's the premise is um the female and male main character are both contestants on like a reality TV show. I like anything within the setting of reality TV, so I thought it would be pretty fun just to read this book. Then I have Curvy Girl Summer by Danielle Allen. I have heard about this or seen this book circulating for a while, so I just added it to my TBR. Plus, it has the word summer in it. So I have to read it in the summer. And then I want to read all of Annabelle Monaghan's books. I want to read Nora Goes Off Script, same time next summer, Summer Romance, and then I think her new book, It's a Love Story, comes out this year as well, if it didn't already come out. And so I've heard a lot of really, really good things about Annabelle Monaghan's books, and so I do want to get to them. And then I also want to read The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. I read Red, White, and Royal Blue by this author a few years ago, and I loved that book. Loved, absolutely obsessed with the movie. Um, and so I heard about The Pairing. I heard it takes place in Europe on like a food tour, so there are lots of vivid descriptions of like food and what is it like food and I don't know, just Europe and the scenery. And I thought that would be really, really fun. I heard it's really atmospheric, so I do want to read that one. And then I have Between Friends and Lovers by Charlene Obuobi. Um, I don't know. I've heard a lot of people talk about this book. I think Sarah Caroli read it last year and she said it was really, really good. So it's just another one of those random ones that I just saw some people talking about and I thought would be really, really fun to pick it up. And then I want to read Audrey and Bash Are Just Friends, Tia Williams' new release. It already came out, but I'm saving it for summer. But it's going to be one of the first books that I read in June. I am so excited. Audrey is actually Ava's daughter in 7 Days in June, and I think it's so cute that she's getting her own book. Um, excuse me, it's supposed to be YA, but I will read anything Tia Williams writes, even if it's YA. And I loved Audrey in 7 Days in June, so I'm really excited to see her get her own cute little love story. And Tia Williams said a lot of Audrey's modeled after her own daughter, who I believe is like 16 or 15, which I think is really, really cute. I also have the rom-commers and the love haters on my TBR list. Those are also both by Catherine Center, and I do want to try them because I do think I would like them more than The Bodyguard. Um, and then I also want to read Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is such a classic Christina Lauren book. I can't believe I've never read it, but I never have, and so I really do want to read that one. And then I have Flirty Little Secret by Jessica Lepe. I don't know if I'll read this book. I saw the book in Barnes and Noble and I thought the cover was cute. I don't even really remember what it was about, but if I remember to read it, I will read it. And then I have Savor It by Tara DeWitt. I think this is it about like is it restaurant competition or cooking competition or something, or like someone in the book is opening up a restaurant. I don't know. Destiny Sidwell really liked this book from what I remember of her review, and I've seen a lot of people talk about it, so it sounds really interesting, so I do want to read it. And then I also have Passion Project by London Sperry. This is a newer book. I saw it as a book of the month pick, but I just didn't pick it because I knew I probably wouldn't get to it till later this summer, and I didn't want to just have it sitting on my physical TBR. But I heard it kind of takes place in New York City. And then I kind of heard it's about a woman who's trying to find like her passion or her joy in life, and then the male main character is just there to like help her, and it's like a romance, which I think is really really cute. um I also have Ready or Not. I think Haley Pham read it and said that it was good. I think it's accidental pregnancy, which I don't love, but I do know it takes place in New York, and so I think it would be fun. I don't love the accidental pregnancy trope. If I'm thinking of the right book, then I think it was in this book, but um and I'm trying to give it an open mind. Maybe read a little bit outside of my comfort zone and see if I would like this one. And then I also have Problematic Summer Romance. Ali Hazelwood is popping these books out like freaking biscuits at Popeyes at this point. Like she is one right after the other, right after the other. She just released a book this year, and I think Problematic Summer Romance is being released later this month, if not in June. But it basically she had a book she released last year, Not in Love, and the male main character's sister is the female main character in Problematic Summer Romance. And so I'm excited to check that one out too and see what that's about. And then for the first time, I'm going to include romantasy on my summer TBR. This year, I have been trying to get back into romance with not much success so far. Not romance, sorry, fantasy. I've been trying to get back into fantasy with not much success. Um, I'm just not the biggest fantasy person, but there are a lot of romantasy books that have just heard that I am really intrigued by. Um, and one of those is Phantasma and Enchantra. I've heard it was similar to Carvel, and I read Carvel earlier this year in January to try to see what it was about, to see if maybe I would like Phantasma, and I hated Carvel. And so I am hopeful. I do want to read Phantasma this summer. I'm hopeful that I will like that book. I also want to read Powerless by Lauren Roberts. The Kingdom of the Wicked series, I think, is romantasy. And so let's see if I get to any of them. Fantasy just makes me nervous, and it's so funny because when I was a kid, I used to love fantasy, but now I just find it so hard to get into, and I don't find it as interesting anymore. And so I'm hopeful that maybe I can find the right romantasy series this summer. Um, I have been rereading Throne of Glass, and I really do like that, but I don't really think Throne of Glass is romantasy. So I read The Assassin's Blade last month, and then I'm gonna try to read Throne of Glass this month, but I might have to shelve the rest of the series until later this year because I don't think they would fall under the romantasy category, but that is okay. I also want to read Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. I have heard about this book for a while, and I heard that it's really, really bad. And to be honest, this is very toxic of me, but sometimes I love being a hater. And I read Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey. I think it was 2 years ago, and I absolutely hated that book so much. I thought it was so bad. I heard Fangirl Down is not good, but I've heard that it's so bad that I'm just curious. I'm curious to see how bad it really, really is. And so, so yeah, that may be toxic, but that is a book that I do want to get to this summer. Um, but yeah, everyone, that is it. That is my summer TBR. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you just got some new recommendations, either whether it's from the books that I talked about as books that I love, or um these new books that I want to read. It's so funny because I don't really consider myself a romance reader because I don't read exclusively romance, but because for the past few years I've been reading like only romance for the summer, and then of course I'll read a couple of romance books scattered throughout the year. My when I look at like my most read genre, it's literally majority romance. It skews so heavily towards romance because that's all I read in the summer. And so I just find it so interesting. I'm excited to see how this summer goes because I love reading romance, but I feel like in the other parts of the year it's not what I primarily read. And so I just find it so obviously it's very obvious if I only read one genre for 3 months out of the year, that's going to take up at least a quarter of the majority of like the genres that I read, but I don't know, I still find it funny for some reason. But either way, it's fine. I do love romance. I think romance is supposed to be fun. Um and I just love that you always know there's going to be a happy ending. There is one book that I that you always know for the most part that there's going to be a happy ending. And so even if the themes are different, or even if some themes or some plots are different and some topics are a little bit heavier, um I do think it's really, really fun to um, just have that predictability. It makes me feel stable, especially when I'm not having the best mental health. I'm like, it's time for a romance read. So yeah, to all my romance lovers out there, to all my book lovers in general, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you all in the next one. All right, bye.